Nobody wants to live a boring life, but some people still do. And I don't know if I would call my life boring, but it is definitely not as interesting or as exciting as it could be. When I was younger, I always thought that I was going to grow up to live an interesting life full of adventure. But when I look at my life now, it's pretty normal. I do the things that everybody else does. I graduated from college, I have an internship, and apart from some travel experiences and some unusual hobbies, I do pretty much what everyone else does. This is something that I thought a lot about over the last few days. My girlfriend recently watched a documentary about a tattoo artist, and afterwards she came to me and she said, "This guy is such an interesting person, he lived such an interesting life." And she told me about all the things he did, all the people he knew and all his experiences. And I thought, yes, he really is a very interesting person. And then I thought, I want that. I want to live an interesting life. I want people to look at me and say, this is an interesting person. But as I started thinking about it, I realized that this is the wrong way to look at it. When I want people to think that I'm interesting, I'm like a person who's buying an expensive cars to impress other people. It's just my ego. It's just me caring about what others think instead of just doing what I really want. I thought about that a lot because I do want to live an interesting life. Not for others, but for myself. When I'm going to look back on my life at the end of my life, I want to be able to look back on many memories and experiences. I want to be able to say that I really lived. And even if everybody else thinks I'm boring, as long as I am happy and as long as I'm excited about my life, that's all that matters. Ironically, I think that if I would approach my life that way to make it interesting for myself, I would also become more interesting to others. But that still leaves the question, how can I make my life more interesting? I thought about that question a lot and I came up with a few ideas. Follow your interests. I think that what ultimately makes the difference between interesting people and boring people is that interesting people follow their interests. Interesting people do what interests them and they explore their interests and try new things instead of just doing what everyone else does. And that is something that I really have to learn and that I really should do more of. So I came up with a little exercise for myself to find some specific things that I can do, some changes that I can apply to my life to make it more interesting. It's a journaling exercise, so if you want, get a piece of paper and get a pen and let's do this together. Make a list of things that interest you. Okay, now take a piece of paper and just write down a list with everything that comes to your mind that interests you. This is just brainstorming and it absolutely does not have to be perfect. We're just collecting ideas at this point. So if you aren't sure if something should be on this list or not, then just write it down for now and we can still remove it later. If you find it difficult to come up with ideas, I find it very helpful to take a look at the books in your bookcase and at the videos you watch on YouTube, your Pinterest boards, your favorite movies. All these things are clues to your interests. I'm really curious to know what you come up with, by the way, so if you want, share some of your interests in the comments. Alright, I just finished the exercise and I ended up with a long list of things that interest me and things that I could pursue further. So there's all kinds of things on this list like photography, philosophy, filmmaking, literature, martial arts, language learning, travel, parkour, mountaineering, meditation, yoga, scuba diving, kayaking, minimalism, camping, motorcycles. It's just a long list of random stuff that interests me, and that's kind of the point. But this list is way too long to be of any value because I could not possibly pursue all of these things at the same time. So I think it's very important that we cut down that list in the next step. Choose your top 3 from the list. So in the next step, choose 3 of them that you want to pursue for now. Now that doesn't mean that you will never pursue any of the others. You can always go back and repeat the exercise and make changes. So just go with your gut feeling. What resonates with you the most at the moment and what feels right for you. I think that it's best to prioritize here so you can put more attention and effort into the most important things, and that makes it so much more likely that they actually get done. I know when went through that entire list a couple of times and I just went with my gut feeling here. There's not really a right or wrong answer which ones I should pursue. It's just what resonates with me at the moment, what interests me at the moment. And funny enough, I chose actually the first 3 items on this list. So I guess as I was writing this list, the first things that came to mind were already the things that I ended up actually wanting to pursue. So these 3 things are photography, tattoos, and skating. So in the next step, I'm going to take these 3 things and try to come up with some specific ideas of how I can pursue these interests. Come up with specific action steps. Okay, now we have identified 3 interests that we want to pursue. So for each of these items, brainstorm different things that you could do to pursue this interest. The goal here is to end up with specific action steps that you can take to pursue this interest. Again, I think it's helpful to start just brainstorming freely and write down everything that you can think of, and then later cut that list down to a manageable number of maybe 3 to 5 items. These action steps can come in many different forms, but I found that most of them fall into 3 categories: information, community, and action. Information. This includes reading books, watching documentaries and videos, listening to podcasts, or asking people. So all things that you can do to learn more about a topic. Community. This means seeking out people with the same interest. So join clubs, look for mentors, and talk to people. Action. This simply means actually doing things. These categories are of course not at all exclusive, so there might be things that don't fall into any of them, and there might be things that fall into more than one of them. These categories don't really matter, but they might be helpful when you get stuck looking for possible action steps. I now brainstormed some ideas of how I could pursue these things. For photography, I wrote that I could take a photography course online, I could read a photography book, I could take photos every day to practice doing photography, I could do different photography exercises, I could join a photography club, I could learn about the history of photography and about famous photographers, I could try to do a semi-professional photo shoot and maybe find somebody who would be interested in doing a portrait shoot with me or something like that. And I could try to connect to photographers or to intern with a photographer. So these are just many different ideas that I could use to pursue photography further, and I'm not necessarily going to do all of them. But for now, that's the list that I came up with. For tattoos, I wrote down that I could learn about the history of tattooing. I could also learn about different styles and artists. I could get a tattoo myself. I could even learn how to tattoo. And I could visit a tattoo convention to meet people and learn more about tattooing. My list for skating includes learning about the history of skating and to learn about famous skaters, to learn about skate culture, to learn how to skate because at the moment I can't skate, to learn some simple tricks, and I could visit a skate park to meet skaters. I think that I ended up with some interesting ideas here. Now I just have to cut it down so it's more manageable and I can have only a few action steps that I can actually pursue. In the previous steps, I brainstormed all kind of things that I'm interested in. I selected 3 of those things and then I brainstormed ideas of how I could pursue these interests. I now chose 3 specific action steps for each of these interests. So for photography, I chose that I'm going to read a photography book. I'm going to do photography exercises every day for the next 30 days. And I'm going to try to do a photography shoot. For tattoos, I decided to learn about tattoos, to learn about the history and about artists. So I'm going to watch some documentaries, read some blogs and that sort of stuff. I think I'm going to get a tattoo. And I'm going to try to learn how to tattoo. For skating, I also have 3 action steps. I'm going to learn to skate, and to do that I'm going to practice 30 minutes every day for the next 30 days. And I'm going to learn about skating, about the culture and about the history. And I want to visit a skate park to meet other skaters. Now that last one might have to wait for a bit because at the moment I live in a tiny village where there's no skate park anywhere near, but I'm probably going to move in the not so distant future, so then that might become an option. Take action. This is the hardest but also the most important step of this process. You now created a list of specific things that you can do to pursue your interests, and now you have to do these things. So put them on your to-do list, put them on your calendar, and just do it. I have to say that honestly I found this exercise really helpful. It really got me excited about my interests, and it really brought me a lot of clarity about how I can pursue these interests. And I think I'm going to repeat this exercise in the future because I ended up with a huge list of interests, and I chose 3 of them that I'm most excited about at the moment, but there are so many more interests on this list that I absolutely do want to pursue in the future. So I think it would be really interesting to repeat this exercise in a month or in 3 months, and then try to go through all of these different interests. It would be really cool to see what I end up with in the next few years if I consistently do this exercise every once in a while and always try to pursue new interests, learn new things, and I think that would make my life so much more interesting and so much more exciting. I would highly encourage you to also give this exercise a try. It was really helpful for me, and I think it might also be very interesting for you. So if you do decide to give this exercise a shot, let me know in the comments below and tell me how it went for you and what you ended up with. I am a very analytical person. I like to plan things very thoroughly. I like to create lists and all of that. So this process that I talked about works well for me. But I also know that there are many people out there who like to be more spontaneous and less structured. So if that's you, feel free to change this exercise and do what works for you. Maybe you don't want to write everything down. That's okay. Just follow along in your head or make changes as you want. But I hope that you still find this useful. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you found it helpful or interesting, and I will see you if you want in my next video.